I realized I had made a mistake with the second word I said, but it was too late. You can't take back something like that, especially in front of his boss. My name is Danielle, and I'm 32 years old from Fort Worth, Texas. This is the story of how a dumb joke at a work party turned my marriage upside down. Last Friday, my husband, Troy, who is 37, invited me to his company's end-of-year party. To be honest, I wasn't thrilled about going. These corporate events are always awkward, and I never know what to say to his coworkers. But Troy insisted it was important, and that it would reflect well on him if I attended. Okay, I thought, I'll play the supportive wife for one night. I spent extra time on my hair and makeup, put on that green dress he likes, and tried to look polished, whatever that means. But as soon as we arrived, I knew it was going to be one of those nights where all I could do was smile and nod. The first hour went fine. We mingled and played the How Do You Know Troy game. I maintained my best behavior during conversations with his coworkers. I had one drink, then another, and by the time dinner was served, I started to feel more at ease. Then he walked in, Troy's boss, Mr. Rick. Troy often complains about him at home, saying he's always on my back and never satisfied with my work. I had imagined Mr. Rick as a grumpy, gray-haired micromanager, but to my surprise, he was young, maybe in his late 40s, sharply dressed, and the type of man who commands attention without even trying. I immediately understood why Troy felt pressured by him. We all sat around a big round table, me, Troy, his boss, and a few other co-workers, laughing and chatting about holiday plans. The conversation shifted to football. Troy, a die-hard Cowboys fan, lives and breathes the team, while Mr. Rick turned out to be an Eagles fan. If you know football, you know Cowboys and Eagles fans don't mix well. They started playfully bantering, but I could tell Troy was getting that look, the one he gives when he's losing an argument but doesn't want to admit it. That's when I made my mistake. I leaned forward, grinned, and said, well, if you spent as much time at home as you do defending the Cowboys, maybe you'd win something for once. The table fell silent. Mr. Rick let out a loud laugh, slapped the table, and said, I like her. She has a point. But Troy didn't laugh. He didn't even look at me. He just sat back in his chair, staring at the table as if counting to 10 in his head. I knew I should have stopped there, but I didn't. Maybe if you put that much effort into our finances, we wouldn't be fighting over the cable bill every month, I added with a smirk, thinking I was being clever. Silence. Mr. Rick took a sip of his drink. One coworker gave me an awkward yikes smile. Beneath the table, Troy bumped my knee, a subtle shut-up signal. I ignored it. Don't look at me like that, I said, tilting my head at Troy. I'm just joking. You know I'm joking. No, Danielle, he replied quietly, his voice sharp and low. You're doing too much. The atmosphere at the table grew tense. Forks scraped plates, but no one said a word. I tried to play it off, acting like it was no big deal, but deep down, I knew I'd crossed a line. The rest of dinner was uncomfortable. Troy barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was in curt, one-word answers. I was beginning to feel that uneasy sense of alarm, not outright panic, but that nagging sensation in the back of your mind when you start realizing you may have underestimated something. It wasn't until later that evening that he finally called. I answered on the first ring, trying to sound nonchalant. Oh, you finally remembered you have a wife, I said, leaning against the counter with one hand. Danielle, he began, his tone calm yet frosty, we need to talk. Oh, now you want to talk? Where were you last night, huh? Don't do this, he interrupted, his voice steady but firm. I'm not playing games with you. I'm the one playing games? I shot back. You're the one who stormed out like a sulking teenager. I left because I'm exhausted, Danielle, he said sharply. Tired of being embarrassed by you. His words stung, leaving me momentarily speechless. Look, I'm not coming home tonight, he continued. I'm staying at my mom's for a while. I need space. Space. I chuckled bitterly, though it wasn't genuine. It was more of a shield than anything else. Space for what? You're acting like I betrayed you or something. But no, you're the one breaking me down, making me feel insignificant. I won't live like that anymore. My chest tightened. Wow. So now I'm the villain? I asked, slipping fully into a wounded tone. You're abandoning our marriage because of a joke? He sighed audibly, the sound of his frustration carrying through the line. I could picture him rubbing his face, his usual habit when things got tense. This isn't just about last night, Danielle, he said quietly. It's everything. The way you talk to me, the way you always have to be right. I can't win with you. I'm done trying. My heart raced. You're really doing this? I asked, my voice cracking. You're really ending our marriage. No, Danielle. You ended it, he replied, his words landing heavier than I expected. I'm just walking away from the wreckage. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, stunned, clutching the phone to my ear as if willing it to connect again. It didn't. For a long time, I just held the phone, staring at the call-ended screen like it might change. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I don't cry over things like this. He'll come back, I thought. He always comes back. But this time felt different. I called him back, but it went straight to voicemail. I called again, still no answer. I was about to leave a message. I'm not that desperate. I scrolled to Rachel's name, my finger hovering over it before I reconsidered. I already knew what she'd say. Her classic, well, you kind of pushed him too far this time lecture. I didn't have the energy for it, so I sat alone instead. By the second day, I felt a shift in my chest, a weight settling there. You know the feeling when you replay everything and finally start listening to what the other person said. His words echoed in my mind, like a melody I couldn't stop hearing. You break me down like you want me to feel small. I'm done trying. I hated those words. For the first time, I couldn't twist them into something that validated me. I couldn't blame him for being dramatic or overly sensitive. This wasn't on him, it was on me. But I didn't call. My pride wouldn't let me. Instead, I did something worse. I made a post on Facebook. It's funny how some people think they're the victim when they've been the problem all along. Stay away if you want. I'm thriving over here. I added a selfie for effect, all dressed up like I had somewhere important to be, even though I hadn't left the house in 2 days. I sat back and watched the comments roll in. Girl, you deserve better. If he can't handle you at your worst, he doesn't deserve you at your best. The instant validation was exactly the rush I needed. Friends texted me, and I soaked it all in like it was dessert. But by the third night, the silence was deafening. There were no texts, no missed calls, no "where are you?" It was as if I'd vanished. That night, I cracked. I found myself staring at our wedding photo on the mantel, the scene feeling almost like a crime scene. My smile in the picture seemed forced, and his eyes looked weary, something I'd never noticed before. Was he tired too? I sank onto the couch, holding the old photo in my lap. I flipped it over and traced the date scribbled in Sharpie on the back, April 22nd, 2016. My thumb lingered over the ink as I tried to convince myself none of this was my fault. But a nagging voice in my head grew louder. You never apologized. I ignored it, flipping the picture back over and setting it down. I didn't owe him an apology. He overreacted. A grown man could have stayed and talked it out, but he ran like a child. That's on him. At least, that's what I told myself. But by the fifth night, I couldn't ignore the truth. I'd messed up.